this is probably the first meeting of council order at 7 p.m., so good on us for doing that. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Please stand with me and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jake, I forgot to ask you, are we set up online? Okay. Rory, will you call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Robinson. Here. Gettle.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Sperry.
Here.
And Glover.
Here. Thank you. All right, we'll hear from Chief Thomas for the Unified Police Report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I hope you found our drone presentation interesting. It's definitely kind of fun, state-of-the-art technology that's helped us out. I went over our case report. Obviously, we don't have our comm stats for the month. They're a little preliminary, but it looks like we're sitting at just over 1,000 cases last month. 3 years prior to that, our average was about 860, so we've seen just a slight uptick in cases. I haven't really gone into the type or anything like that, and I'll take a look at it once the CommStat comes out and we'll have more complete statistics to look at. Just to give you an update on our homicide investigation from a few weeks ago, it's still active. We're not getting a lot of cooperation. Our violent crimes unit has been out even doing door-to-door, trying to get witnesses to cooperate. It is gang related, and then they'll keep plugging away at that until we get some resolve. But at this point, every indication is it's kind of really not gained any traction at this time. So we still are looking for any assistance if anyone with the public has that information. I know Laura Magnus put out a contact number a few weeks ago that would be beneficial if we get that call. I got just a little update from Hillcrest High at homecoming. Councilman Sperry actually was at the event and noticed a lot of police presence. We did have an officer that broke up a fight and then ended up getting surrounded by a crowd, and one adult decided he wanted to try to fight with our officer. There was no physical altercation. The officer did pull out a taser and give him a warning, and we got compliance with that, and we're able to kind of settle things down and de-escalate the situation. I do want to remind everyone, and VEC has been trying to do this for quite some time, but the 801-743-7000 number, which is probably on a lot of fridge magnets and swag that's been turned out to the public over the years, that is now just a UPD administration line. So now for VEC, for non-emergency numbers, it's 801-840-4000. And that will, obviously if you call the non-emergency line and you get the admin after hours, it will give you a phone tree and give you other guidance. Obviously if it's emergency, call 911. I do want to update you with we designed some stickers and some decals for all the Midvale assigned patrol vehicles. I know that Councilman Gettle contacted me on a different issue and apparently noticed some of them and likes them, so we got at least one thumbs up. But all the vehicles assigned to Midvale do now have a sticker on both back windows as well as the rear of the vehicle indicating they're assigned to Midvale City. We will be supporting the car show this Friday from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. as well as any kind of assistance they need afterwards or even prior to, if they need assistance with the road closures. I know in the past with some of the Main Street road closures, there was some where some of the Midvale City staff didn't feel good going out on the roadway, so we're happy to accommodate that, get an officer there with some red and blues and make it safer. And then the last thing, I want to, and I probably should let Brad do this, but I'm going to steal his thunder. This Saturday, the Utah Firefighters Chili Cook-Off is at 9256, I think I got that right, 9256 South State Street. I believe it's right in front of the Real Stadium. If you've never been to that and you have time, please go. All the benefits go towards the Utah or the U of U burn camp programs. but it's a real fun time. It's where all the firefighters in the valley sponsor a booth. They cook their best chili. Your entrance includes tickets to sample the different cups of chili, and then you can do, people's choice, your choice. Obviously, UFA wins every year, right? So I would recommend it. It's 11 to 3, I believe. It goes to a great cause, and it is good. It's a great time. In the past, it's been down at Southtown Mall, so a little bit different venue, but if you get a chance, swing on in there. It's a good time. That's all I have to report tonight. Do you have any questions or comments for me?
I'll just add that I was driving with my wife the other day and saw the Midville sticker on the back of one of the SUVs, and I got all excited and said, "Do you see that?" So,
Great.
thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, moving on to public comments. Any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for public hearing on the agenda tonight may address the city council at this point by stepping to the microphone and giving their name for the record. Do we have any public comments? And just please state your name for the record.
Do I need to state my address too?
Just your name.
Just your name.
Just my name. My name is Daniel Pipkin. I would just like to make a comment and a thank you today. I'd like to advocate for active transportation in our community. I've been living in Midvale for about 2 years now, and I've noticed that some of the biggest issues are surrounding housing and density, as well as congestion. And active transportation is one of those things where I don't really think there are any silver bullets, especially when it comes to city administration things, but having trails that are well-connected, like a well-connected network of bike trails, as well as having a walkable city, I think is a really good lever for the city. And I'd like to thank the mayor for mentioning this in his most recent message this month, as well as the assistant city manager mentioning some of the canal things, the canal trail and the Main Street redesign going on. There were two specific things that I was going to mention. I don't want this feedback to seem prescriptive. I don't want to tell the city how to run itself. But there were two kind of ideas that I had. One of them being having somebody on staff, a planner on staff for applying for grants, as well as just being able to kind of do some of the planning, maybe engineering work behind active transportation, someone who's solely focused on that. That's one idea that I have of like one way we can push it forward. Another one being a active transportation committee that I've seen work in other cities where a citizen committee just comes together and does that. Anyway, the mayor's letter asked for feedback. This is my public comment version of feedback. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
I guess I'll just say that I know you mentioned some of the stuff that the assistant city manager had mentioned before, but there are a number of projects in addition to the trails that we're working on. A big part of that has to do with the council has previously identified active transportation as being one of their goals. And so while we're in that planning phase, we have applied for grants, and we hope that we'll see some actual construction in the near future on that. But there is we can do more, but I just want to assure you that there is efforts going into active transportation right now.
Okay. Are there any other public comments? Rory, did we have any online comments?
No.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to council reports. We'll start with Councilmember Robinson.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Glover.
Nothing this evening, just glad I'm back.
We're happy to have you back. Councilmember Gettle?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to say we're happy to have Councilmember Glover back. Actually, I also wanted to thank you, Mayor, for all the work you're doing with the UPD board. I know that's very time and labor intensive, and I just, it's a marked improvement over the communication we've received before regarding our position on the UPD board, and I wanted to thank you for keeping us in the loop of what's going on and being a strong voice for Midvale on the board itself, so thank you. And also to City Manager Dahl for the same. That's it for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yeah, I think since we last met, the mayor appointed me, and I guess I was selected to serve on the Canyons Education Foundation Board. And it was a good opportunity just, a week and a half ago or so to participate with the mayor and his wife, Nikki, in one of their annual fundraising events. So it was great to be with them, and the school district or the foundation did raise quite a bit of money for innovative grants, and we'll be meeting later this month to make decisions on which teachers and schools will be awarded those grants. So that's it.
Councilmember Brown?
Yep. I'd like to thank the city manager and Glenn. I had a couple interesting requests this week come in from various citizens between the Black Widows and the Parkway. I don't know how a group of bikers or, on road bikes were pedaling somehow got my information, maybe because your vehicle was marked Midvale City, but they reached out to me and said, hey, on Saturdays, could you not drive your trucks on the Parkway? It's maybe a little bit different during the week when there's lower traffic, but and a runner reached out. So for the very short distance and time that you guys were on it is enough to get a couple people to reach out. So obviously if there's emergencies, that's one thing, but I don't know if do we need to look into some sort of smaller vehicle, like a side-by-side or something for regular maintenance, because the F-150 could take up that whole road, and these, we're talking like $1,000 bikes that aren't really made to go anywhere but, a hard surface.
We do have smaller vehicles. That employee was on call at the time. That is the on-call vehicle. He was just doing kind of a security check. It's been communicated that take a smaller vehicle or avoid it on weekends. So,
yeah. But totally get why you'd have to go down there and stuff. It was just funny that I'm like, they could have only been on there for 10 minutes, and I got 2 random people reach out. So, thank you for responding and working on that. That's all.
Okay.
Wait, I need some clarification. You said something about Black Widows?
Yeah, can we hear
How
more
did that
about
tie into your comment? I'm trying to
There was 2 things that were requested. The first one was the school reached out and said there's Black Widows.
Oh, okay.
That was moved. Glenn himself went and looked at that. Thank you for that. And then there was another request the same week where there was. Glenn knew what I was talking about.
Well, Glenn did. I didn't know. I mean, in my mind, I'm even thinking like, is this biker group known as the Black Widows?
It
What's
was
the connection?
Conversation between me and Glenn.
And I think
Well, tell Public Works to keep handing out Councilmember Brown's phone number to everybody.
That's what happened. I don't know. It was weird.
And you only got bit twice, right?
what's that?
You got bit twice.
Yeah.
Glenn's a superhero now. That's how they all start.
Well, for my report, I will also just start by thanking Glenn and his team for getting on the Black Widow situation, because I know that Councilmember Brown was contacted. I was also contacted by the resident who flagged the school on it. She reached out to me and was worried about the kids playing underneath that bridge, so thank you. Councilmember Gettle, thanks for thanking me on keeping updated on UPD. Speaking of that, I do have another update. So we had, Councilmember Gettle learn this because we had a one-on-one with him, I believe the same day that this meeting happened, but since our last council meeting, the UPD Governance Committee met, where we met with them about one of our cost control measures, that is the UPD board setting a number up front at the beginning of the year, that process that we laid out. So just as a reminder, that is the board setting a number, shared services budget increase amount up front by a vote of a simple majority. Then if the UPD administration comes back at any point, whether through the tentative budget process, the final budget, or any amendments throughout the year that go over that budget goal that the board set, it requires a supermajority of a weighted vote to pass that proposed increase. Just really quickly on the supermajority weighted vote, we did that because currently, if on the on financial issues, if 2 members on the board call for a weighted vote, that is how it works. It's a supermajority of the weighted. So instead of changing that, we just kept with it. Ultimately, the governance committee agreed there was not a formal vote on this because we were actually, Matt and I presented to the committee about that, our proposal. And so at this point, their attorney, Harry, is going to draft this. This has to be done in an interlocal agreement. So at our board meeting later this month, the board will review a draft interlocal agreement to put this into policy. Then we'll go back to the idea is that board members will take that to their councils to get feedback, and then that vote will actually happen in November. But just so you know, it's gone to the governance committee, but we won't see a vote on it for 2 months. And then, quickly, are there any questions on that? Okay. And then just the other thing, again, with the organizational review process, I was appointed as the chair of this ad hoc committee to lead that process. Our first meeting as a committee is on Thursday. So at our next council meeting, I'll update on how that's going. The other thing, moving on from UPD, just a reminder that the Utah League of Cities and Towns, their convention is this week. I know I will be there, Matt will be there, at least the 2 of us. And then for residents, bulky waste pickup has started. Keep that in mind and try to, when your day comes, keep your items out of the storm drains, or out of the gutter, so we protect our storm drains. And just keep in mind that even if it's on your scheduled day, they may come 24 hours after that. We've already had 1 pickup day. That was Monday. The next one is tomorrow. If your trash day is generally on Tuesdays. If your trash days are on Wednesdays, your pickup day is October 10th, and if it's Thursdays, then it's October 12th. And as Chief Thomas said, we have that car show this Friday from 4 to 8 on Main Street. That's it. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. Just real quick, one thing that I hadn't quite done yet is get our list of committees that the council and staff are on. We haven't got that list updated since Nate was moved into the assistant city manager position. So I'll be bringing that back on the 18th. I'm only bringing this up to you now in case there are any other changes that you remember from last time that you want to have done. I know Council Member Gettle will have you added onto the animal services officially. But I'll send that out in advance, and so if there's anything that you would like me to look at changing or whatever, we can be prepared for that next meeting, or if you have recommendations or whatnot. And then related to that, in a way, is that I'm not sure if you've all been aware, but there is an effort to try to reboot the community council. They're really sort of looking at it from sort of starting from scratch. So they've had their first meeting in September, and where they're really kind of looking at whether they want to be sort of reform as a private nonprofit, look at being the path of being an official city committee, or just, not being in a formal organization, just a group that gets together. So they're really at that sort of basic level of discussion there. They're going to have their second meeting on the 12th of October. Thank you. And they'll continue those discussions. We're really letting them take the lead on it as a community council to decide what path they want to go down. But I'm just letting you know that that meeting or that group is getting back together, and that they're just starting sort of from bare bones on that. The next thing I wanted to bring up is just last week we had another difficult water leak. As you recall, 2 years ago, was we went through the process of increasing the water fees. That was with the intent of us moving forward with fixing a lot of our aged system. While we are working on doing that, a lot of these leaks that we're seeing are part of that larger system that we'll eventually get to, but sort of shows why we need to put a lot of work into that system. Our crews came out on Thursday at about 7, and we're there until about 7 the next morning, working on on a water line just north of the park. And there's been several of those recently where they've had to put in all-nighters or work on those all day during the weekend or whatnot. And so I want to say that I want to thank the Public Works crew for the work that they do, and just sort of reiterate the importance of the capital improvement plan that we've been embarking on in order to improve our overall water system. There will always be leaks when the weather changes and things move around in the ground, but our hope is that we'll be able to minimize those and make it so that the repairs will be easier on our crew. Anyway, thanks again, and that's all I have this evening.
Matt, I have a question about that. As you know, these leaks are happening and we have to make repairs. Are we repairing them in a way that's going to meet the overall repair plan so that we're not doing like a repair that's going to require another repair down the line? Does that make sense? I
hear what you're saying, and Glenn could talk a little bit more about it, but like in the case of this leak that occurred next to the park, essentially what happened is the old pipe, they would fix it and then it would collapse, and then they would fix it and it would collapse, and I think they did that 4 or 5 times. So in the end, they did replace a large chunk of pipe in that particular case. But I'll let Glenn talk about.
Yeah, I would say the repairs are relatively short-term fixes. We'll have other failures on that pipe until it's replaced.
Okay. Thanks.
Matt, I've got a follow-up question on the community council.
Yep.
So you said they're kind of looking to reboot and trying to figure some things out. I mean, are we giving them direction on, if you're going to form, here's what we'd like to see from the city? They're independent, but it seemed for years they were trying to find an identity. Why do we exist? What's their purpose, right? So, I mean, I just look at it. Are we giving them any direction on here's what we would like to see?
The approach that that I've taken with them is that I laid out in detail essentially 3 different approaches, the approaches I mentioned before, and as part of that went through and discussed the implications for them as far as if they become a city, an official city committee, per our code, there are extra sort of steps that need to occur that are associated with that, but that would make it make it easier for them to carry out some city functions, beautification committees, and do those kinds of things. And then as I talked about them being if they wanted to go the route of being a nonprofit because they have some reason that they want to be able to receive and utilize funding, external funding, that they could do that, but there's a certain amount of bureaucracy with that. So I have not pushed them in a direction, but I've provided them with details on each of those different approaches, and I was going to let them make that choice. Part of the reason for that and what I explained to them is that if they're not bought into whichever direction they end up going, then I'm not sure what the success of that organization will be. And so my hope is that if they kind of collectively decide which route they want to go, we'll support them, is what I've told them so far, is we'll support them in that.
Okay.
But if you have thoughts, I'd be happy to share that with them.
Well, I mean, again, I'm just trying to figure out what's the purpose of that committee. What are they going to do? I know they used to help with harvest days, and then that stopped a few years ago. And that's where I felt like they didn't have direction, but we'd suggested they could do a beautification committee. I mean, we just heard a comment about they could have input on active transportation in the city. I mean, there's some things they can do, but it just didn't seem like that's what they wanted to help with in the past. It was, I know I went to some meetings and they'd like bring in kind of like, I don't know, somebody from another community even like asking for donations. It's like, how is this helping our city? I mean, what's the purpose of having this meeting?
Right.
So, okay. Well, I appreciate you giving them some direction, and we'll see what they decide.
Yeah.
Matt, what time is that meeting on the 12th?
I'm not sure that I've actually, last time I believe it was at 5:30. I believe it'll be at that same time in the Dahl conference room.
Okay.
I
Are
don't
they,
think it's actually been scheduled yet. I haven't
Okay.
received an actual schedule, so I just emailed the person that's kind of heading it up to see if they had a time nailed down. So once I have that, I'm more than happy to let you know.
Thank you, Heidi.
are they going to use resources? I know in the past, we've publicly noticed the meetings and, they were required to submit minutes and all of that. Do they know that they need to do that, or, because I
Well-
think it was a recommendation from the legal department because they were functioning and using city resources that they had to notice, like a public notice, and have someone to take minutes and such.
Well, it depends on how they reform. And that's part of what I was explaining to them. Like the highest amount of sort of reporting and that kind of stuff is if they actually become a formal committee of the city.
Okay.
But then if it goes down to them just sort of being a group that just gets together to talk about issues or whatever, then there really isn't at that point any requirements that they do anything in particular.
So the community council, as we knew it 2 or 3 years ago, is gone. And they're not reforming as they were prior to COVID, I think was when they met last.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, no reporting requirements then. Okay, got it.
At this point.
Okay, thank you. All right, going on to our department report, we will hear from Mariah Hill for the admin services report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the Justice Court has just a 10% increase in cases filed this August compared to last August. Now I don't know if I said increase or decrease, but 10% decrease in cases filed. But we did have a 6.2% increase in the revenue they collected this August versus last August. And then the other big update for them is that they've had stricter COVID restrictions because they had to follow what came down from the AOC. But those have all been lifted, and as of today, they have resumed all in-person court operations. They will continue to have a web option when necessary and appropriate, but have resumed in-person court, and they're pretty excited about that. IT, Probin, our GIS specialist, has had twins, him and his wife, so that's pretty exciting for them. They are steadily working on computer replacements that have come up this year. They're working to raise awareness of cybersecurity this month, as it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And then they have completed 67 help desk tickets in September, and the GIS hub that we've been looking for is ready for internal review, so we're going to send that out to employees and I guess you guys, if you'd like it, to make sure that it is having the best information for each department to be the most useful for residents and for staff. In finance, we've got the auditors here in-house for their field work this week, so we're beginning. We've got all our year-end stuff kind of wrapped up, and they're taking a look at it. I'm finding it's much smoother for my involvement this year, as I was actually here for the year in which we are auditing. So that's going pretty smoothly. We are beginning discussions on water and sewer bonding, like Matt was talking about. I think you'll see the very first piece of that next meeting, and then we'll probably really begin the process at the beginning of 2023. And then we've got a vacancy. Currently, we had a finance clerk position that we're morphing into an accountant position, so hopefully we'll get that posted this week and looking to fill that. And then I told these guys, my staff, that I was gonna tell you about my utility billing dream team, because I was talking with them about how they're feeling about things, and it's just going really, really well in utility billing right now. So Leslie is our customer service side, and as we've had a vacancy and somebody on vacation, I've been up kind of supporting her and just watching her customer service and how awesome she is. She just literally cares about every person that she talks to. And so she's awesome, and then runs the billing process. And then we have Jared, who is our meter technician, and more days than not, he comes in literally covered head to toe in dirt, because he is down in holes, digging out meters, finding problems and fixing them, and really is just doing awesome on that front. And so that we're getting he's finding so many like big meters that have not been reading, and so he's awesome. And then Karen, our treasurer, who is the support for all of them and is learning so quickly, has only been here 6 months and hadn't had anything to do with utility billing, but is learning and helping and supporting her team. And so utility billing, although the weird thing is that if you're looking for I was looking at the data and the reasons for estimates and things, and I think they don't really actually look better, but what I know on the other side is that we're finding more problems and fixing them. And so even though, well, I know that you guys had a lot of meters that need to be swapped out, and this does look much better, but I think even Karen was telling me Jared gets a little discouraged because he's like, I'm doing all this work and it doesn't seem to be better. But it is every month, every cycle, it's better because he really is doing a lot of work. So, any questions?
Seeing none?
Okay,
Thanks,
you.
Mariah. All right, we've got 2 public hearings for tonight. The first one, Midvale City requests amendments to section 17.711 of the Midvale City Municipal Code to 1, modify provisions for neon signs, and 2, modify landscaping requirements for parking lots. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Mayor, I motion we open the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay. We are in a public hearing and we'll hear from Vendaline.
Can we have the other one? Yeah, I think it may have been mislabeled. Mayor and members of the City Council, I'll do some talking while we get the video. This code text amendment is split up into 2 different parts. One is about neon signage, the other one is about landscaping, and this all applies to our form-based code area, which is where we are right here in the historic downtown. And let me talk about the neon signage first. Up to this point in time, the municipal code has not allowed neon signage in the form-based code area. And we've had some discussion about that. And on Main Street there are some neon signs. Actually, I put one in here. You may recognize this. This was from the movie. I guess it doesn't look exactly like this right now. But as part of a historic Main Street, neon signs have been there, and they shouldn't necessarily be outlawed. So the proposal here is to allow neon signs if there's a historic connection. If there has been a certain neon sign, it can be rebuilt. If there's a historic building, you can have a new neon sign that's part of the historic look. So that's the first part of this amendment. The second part is pretty much a cleanup item, I would say. As part of our revitalization efforts on Main Street, we've gotten a few development proposals up to this point in time. And some of the designs were structured in a way that we had surface parking lots that had substantial building overhangs. And this change here is quite simple. It allows us to not enforce a landscaping requirement where there is a building overhang. It's pretty self-explanatory in that way. If you have an area that's actually covered by the building, even though the entire parking lot isn't a parking structure, landscaping would probably not do well in that situation where it doesn't get much or no natural light. And so this is what this particular amendment allows us to basically say, developer, that part of the parking lot does not have to have shrubs, for example, to enhance the aesthetics. So that's what these two amendments are about. The Planning Commission recommended approval, and the staff recommendation is in the same vein. Do you have any questions?
Is there any particular business on Main Street that's requesting either one of these provisions be changed?
The only one I'm aware of is the theater. At some point, they would like to, work on that sign a little bit. Otherwise, there hasn't been anything.
Any other questions or comments for Vendeline? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this item is open for public comment. Do we have any public comments?
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and 2 seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Okay, that public hearing is closed. Moving on to the action item, consider ordinance number 2022-015, an ordinance amending section 17-711 of the Midvale City Municipal Code to 1, modify provisions for neon signs, and 2, modify landscaping requirements for parking lots. Is there a motion to approve?
Mayor, I motion that we approve the action item you just read.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on that?
Is that allowed?
Yeah, because he read the entire, I mean, I could say so.
Oh, because he read it all.
Yeah,
Okay.
I could say so moved if you want.
I just don't want someone to be like, it was not, you technically never passed this neon, and now we're suing the city because there's a neon sign. That's all.
Rory, will you call roll?
Yes. Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
And Gettle.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. Moving on to our second public hearing of the night, consider Victor Sony requests a zone change from Clean Industrial Zone, CI, to the Transit Oriented Development Overlay Zone, TODO, for properties located at 280 and 282 West, 7200 South. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Mayor, I move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. All right, here again from Vendeline.
You have me here again. So here you'll see this is the vicinity of the proposal here. The green box shows the area that's proposed to be rezoned. It's currently a hotel, the Park Inn, and a restaurant that's just between the road and the hotel. The zoning here at this point in time is the Clean Industrial Zone, and the proposal is to change this to the Transit-Oriented Development Overlay. When we go through the analysis on a legislative proposal like this, first, as staff, we look at the master plan, the land use plan, and that's really what the staff report focuses on. And the land use plan envisions this as an area that is going to see substantial change, and that change is driven by some of the investments that have been made in the last 20 to 30 years. You think about widening of I-15 and especially UTA with its TRAX lines. The TRAX station is really across the street, so this is a very close neighbor to the TRAX station. The city's master plan is envisioning this to be an area that is higher in residential densities. the current zone, the clean industrial, is really not the right zone for that. The status quo, as you can see here, allows manufacturing, even recycling centers, hotels, like the current use, but it does not allow dwellings. The TODO allows dwellings, mixed uses, and also substantial increases in density. And these increases in density are, number one, a condition that makes a lot better use of the investments that have already been made, like the tracks line, and also road investments that have been made in the past. As part of our analysis, according to the municipal code, you have that the character of this area is also changing. All of that really leads to the staff recommendation that as staff we feel this has merit to be approved. The Planning Commission had a long discussion about this. You can see that in the staff report. They were, they had one motion that didn't carry, which was just the recommendation to approve. Then the second motion that they made that then carried said that they recommend approval and they asked you to think about a development agreement. One thing, and the city attorney may want to add to this a little bit, that you have to think about is at the zone change stage, we really just look at the current zone and if as a city we want to have the new zone that the developer proposes. As background material, the developer has included what their potential plan is for this property, but there's no obligation at this point on that. It's just background information, and the representatives of the property owner are here, Mr. Sterrett and Mr. Koroun. So if you would like to ask them questions, you surely can. And the staff recommendation is to approve this.
Is there any clean industrial happening in this area right now? I mean, I know there's the Mi Rico Burrito, there's the hotel and the gas station. So, I mean, is what it's zoned for even happening currently?
It seems, the status quo is maintained. If you think about the area, there are, several spaces that are basically, warehousing type of structures. But if you're asking, have we gotten any interest in someone saying, I would like to establish some new type of an industrial use, the answer is no. I mean, the inquiries that we normally get are for more higher density housing.
Do we have the general plan idea that they want to do once it's changed? You said that they've already sort of submitted one, right?
They have submitted what they would like to do with this parcel if this gets approved.
But it wasn't included in the packet, right?
No, it is in the packet.
So it's just it looks like it's just the hotel.
Yes, so what they would like to do is to keep the structure as it is, but renovate it and change the units into permanent dwelling units. That would include, adding closets. So you would basically be looking at a.
So we would take a hotel room and make it into a livable space permanently?
Yeah.
I mean, those are shoeboxes.
They would be small residential units.
Yeah, that's absolutely not what I would envision for a TOD zone. I mean,
Sure.
we keep waiting for someone to create something else in the TOD zone, where it's like we want a denser, mixed-use space, and all we get is applications for that to happen somewhere else, right? Like MODA didn't happen, none of the stuff that's over by me. None of that TOD has provided any mixed use or anything. And this is a massive step backwards. We're talking like a couple hundred square feet, right, of units. I mean, this is like, I don't know. I do not think this is a good plan for Midvale. I was hoping this was not the future plan, them just repurposing the hotel. I mean, that's, they're not changing anything, right? They're just, you know, trying to eke out more money off of rental units. And frankly, there's quite a few clean industrial that goes sort of north into the
Goes north,
freeway
yeah.
and on the other side of the freeway.
My understanding from studying it and talking to the developer is that they want to make it into a senior citizen housing.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't want my grandma living in, you know, something where the kitchen is like the front door.
Well,
You know, like unit N, type 146, it's like literally the fridge and the front door touch. You know, that's not how I envision the corridor of Midvale to go, you know.
I think.
And I get the whole like, hey, that's not what you're supposed to look at it as the zoning, but, you know, this is not how I envision the TOD zone to ever look, you know. So I would like it so our TOD zone didn't look like this.
Have we actually done an analysis as to if this switch fits within the TOD, or if there need to be any?
Not a thorough analysis, because we don't have an application for that. You know, that's part of the conditional use permit. But I mean, when you look into the materials, the applicant hired an architect to do an analysis, and that's all in the materials. There's a letter where the architect basically says, in their view, this would fit into the zone.
It's just a prime location for, you know, tracks. And this is, how many stories is this currently? 2?
It's 2.
I mean, that's not at all what our goal is, right? Like, I wouldn't even say that's really our city plan, right? Like, that's a very, very short term, right? Like, it will quickly want to change over to something more. This is backwards, in my opinion. Like, we would like 4 or 5 story mixed use, you know, mixed housing. This is not that. If this can be squeezed into a TOD, then I would challenge the you know, people over the TOD to refit the code to fit more into a more modern future growth in this area, because this isn't it.
I know it's in here, and I did look over it. It's been a couple days. Explaining why the TODO and not just the TOD.
This is number one, the direction the general plan takes us, and number 2, it's the developer's application. I mean, this is not city initiated.
Does this fit into TOD right now, or is this too high? Because if I remember reading through it correctly, it wanted TODO because of the density it would allow, but does this?
I mean, density-wise, this doesn't max out the zone at all.
Okay.
Not even close.
Yeah, I didn't think so. That's okay. Thank you.
I have some general issues with this. Number one, for the planning commission to deny this and then turn around and approve it with the condition that we consider a development agreement, that, as far as I know, that doesn't have any relevance at all. Like, I don't even know that that's a proper motion, to be honest. Like, I don't know. Was there any discussion why they did it that way?
Yes, there was a pretty long discussion. So the first motion actually wasn't a motion to deny. It was a motion to approve, but the motion failed. The second motion brought that concept of a development agreement into the discussion because some of the planning commissioners felt this may be a better use than the current use, because it's not as transient. You would have, it would basically be a multi-family residential development versus a hotel where you have people stay for a night, for 2 nights. And
But
so
we can't compel someone to give us a development agreement to consider a zone change.
So
It would be nice in a lot of instances, but, you know, to compel them seems to be,
Oh, we've done it before.
well, that,
so you
did we do it properly before?
Yeah,
I know that we have done that before, but
Yeah.
I've had this discussion as well. I mean, for me, a zone change has nothing to do with a development agreement. I mean, you're just kind of, at that point, you're saying, oh, I don't like that development agreement. That then weighs heavily upon your decision to approve the zone change, when the zone change is something completely separate from a development agreement. It's kind of cherry picking, in my opinion.
So the city is certainly, as you as the council, with this being a legislative decision, you're certainly welcome to approve or deny this with any conditions that you want. I mean, that's your prerogative as the city council to say, this is what we feel is best for the community, either one way or the other, and find those, make those findings and then make that motion. So in the past, there have been several projects within probably the last 2 or 3 years in which the council has been concerned that if they approve the zone change, that there would be a bait and switch with the concept plan that was brought before the council, and in which case one of the conditions prior to a zone being or a rezone being approved was that a development agreement had to be entered with the developer to lock them into that project as a condition for that rezone to happen. Now, to answer your first question as well, Councilman, the Planning Commission did make the recommendation, but it's simply that. It's just a recommendation. There's no binding effect to what they motioned, other than to say this is what they think. And it, again, is your prerogative as the city council as a whole to decide whether or not to follow that motion or that recommendation, but it's not binding upon you at all.
And then my follow-up questions, sorry to take so much time on this, is if we approve a zone change that's a TODO and we get a development agreement, is that development agreement binding at that point, even though, you know, they might come back with something else that meets every single element of the TODO zone, but is different than what they told us here tonight?
So yes, it would be binding. Those development agreements attach to the property, and they have an expiration date that says, for anyone who owns this property, you're obligated to build this concept plan as was entered with the city. Now, the flip side of that is if the council feels like we want this property to be rezoned without any conditions, and we would actually prefer a different project, then you can make the motion to approve the rezone and not make a condition of a development agreement for that. You can just approve the rezone, and then any project that would meet the code requirements, they would be able to come in and get approval for that.
But this one would be included in that? Because if it met the requirements.
Yeah, I would have to defer to our planning staff, but that would be correct.
Yeah, I just think the rounds we've done on this street, a 2-story, deep setback property, is so far from what we think would turn over that area. So it's just disappointing to me that that would be the outcome of a zone change that we envision for long-term success near tracks,
We do need senior housing in Midvale and throughout the state, so I do like that element of it. There was a 55-plus community in my district on Fern Circle that was a 55-plus community, and that particular community basically evicted those residents, and now it's just a regular, non-age restricted apartment complex. So I would hate to see something like that happen here as well. I'm sure when they built the one on Fern, they didn't say, well, within 10 years, we plan to evict all the 55-plus people and open it up to any resident, so.
And we have a newer one over here that's 55 plus that every year Gardner, Wasatch, or whoever runs it raises their rent $100 or so, and I personally move out 4 or 5 units every spring because the fixed income people can't afford it. So it's sort of a scam to them, right? Because if you're on fixed income, you don't ever increase your pay. But if you increase rent due to inflation, you just sort of screw over the elderly, and it's very sad that I get to experience that on a very cyclical basis.
The other thing I'd say real quick about this area is, to me, the TODO zones are ones that have walkability and pedestrian safety and access to tracks. This area has one of those 3 elements, and that's access to tracks. I am always amazed that there aren't more pedestrian versus car accidents in this area, because, I drive this area plenty of times, and, there's always just people kind of darting across all lanes of traffic to get to the other side. It's definitely missing those elements of the TODO zone as far as I'm concerned. So hopefully, if we do, there will be some major pedestrian improvements to this area as well.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Vendaline, or we do have the developers here if you'd like to ask them as well. Okay. Well, with that, this item is open for public comment. Do we have any public comments?
Does that include us, or?
Sure. Just please state your name.
Peter Caroon and John Starrett representing the owner of the property. And your comments are well taken, Councilmember Brown. And frankly, I think if you said, we'll give you a TODO zone, but with a development agreement, but we want you to relook at your plans, I think the owner would be very open to that. Our thought was initially senior housing, converting it to senior housing, but based on the comments here and some of the comments from the Planning Commission, I think our developer owner would be very open to looking at a different design if that's what you choose. I think the clean industrial zone probably doesn't make sense for this area based on its location next to tracks and the retail in the vicinity and the location next to access to 7200 South. So I would say I think TODO zone or the TOD zone is a good zoning to have for this area. And then if we need to come back with a plan that the Planning Commission and the Council would prefer to see, I think the owner would be more than willing to look at that. So if you want to pass this, saying we'll pass, but if we want to design different than the agreement, and we want a development agreement with the owner, then I think we'd be happy to take that back to him and say you need a different design, and you have to have a development agreement to have that design approved.
The problem is if we do that, you could just do what you're planning on doing here.
Not if you have a development agreement in place that has to go through the planning commission.
Well, we'd have to have the development agreement with it.
With the zoning change, we can't
It has
just
to be
change
concurrent.
the zone and then, because then you can do whatever you want within that zone. If we have to have the development agreement along with the zoning change to be able to do that. That's correct,
But the
right?
development agreement doesn't necessarily have to include this design, does it?
Well, if we base the zoning change on the development, yes. You have to have them basically together.
Yeah, generally with our development agreements, we're expecting essentially the site plan and concept plan to be locked in, and that we know ahead of time that it's going to meet all the requirements for the requested zone. So that way in the meeting, the city council will do the zone, the rezone, and then the next action item will be to approve the development agreement and then lock that project into place. But without a project, it doesn't really have the desired effect of making sure that the end result is what's desired by the city council if that's still a negotiation.
Okay, I mean, those projects change a little bit anyway as you go through the building approval process, so we understand that. But again, we'd be open to bringing it back with a different design, or you tell us what you'd like to see, then we'd be happy to come back with that.
So I think we could do it one of two ways, and that's to table the action item altogether, and then, you put something together, come back, and then we have those things to look at together. Or we could approve a motion tonight that says that we would approve this change contingent upon a mutually agreeable development agreement. So those.
Yeah, I would caution against the second because it leaves that property in a state of limbo in case the city, in case we're not able to reach a mutually agreeable development agreement.
Well, the thing, the issue that I have with that is, as I mentioned, this is zone for clean industrial, and there's no clean industrial happening in this zone. Like it's not, de facto, it's not a clean industrial zone. It's basically TODO already, just not with the official name.
One other, I guess, piece of guidance too, and I guess we're still in the public hearing too, so there's that. But is if you do decide to table it, if that's the direction you go, requesting that they come back for this zone change with a negotiated development agreement with staff, it would be the most beneficial that we would provide some guidance as part of that tabling as far as what you'd be looking for in that, just to provide some, make sure everyone's on the same page. So if...
I can't believe I'm going to be saying this. This should go on public record. But I've never advocated for this direction, but I think it needs to be closer to what the TOD zone actually is, which is like a 3-story if it's residential only, right? Nate can correct me. You can go up to 5 stories if there's a mixed use, right? That's the TOD zone overlay, right? With a higher density unit count with the, right, this is where Dustin's already laughing at me because I've never advocated for this. So this is my personal opinion, I'm not speaking for the council. But I think where this is located on the entrance to the freeway and the entrance to tracks, that is what I always envisioned. The more density, and then it kind of bleeds out, to less. So for me to be comfortable with changing it to TODO, it would need to sort of fit that sort of general outline.
Yeah. And then just remember the alternative is to keep it as the clean industrial zone, and then it probably just stays as a motel for a long period of time.
Or until someone comes in with a plan and
I'll just add one thing. So the hotel use in the CI zone is allowed. So although it may not be an industrial use, the hotel use is already allowed. I was just going to let you know, this was before I came, shortly before I came, this will be coming to you in a few weeks, but there was a zone change that was tabled pending a development agreement, and that has finally worked its way through the staff with the, back and forth with the developer, and it's ready to move forward to you. So that has been done in the past, and you'll be seeing that soon, where the action on the rezone was tabled pending a development agreement approval by the council, and so that, again, that was a decision that it's working its way back.
We've actually done this quite a few times over the years. It's not something that we're just bringing up.
Right.
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Oh, we need to ask anybody else.
Yeah, we gotta see if anybody else wants to comment.
Do we have any other public comments?
And Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, public hearing is closed. We now move on to our action item. Consider ordinance number 2022-016, rezoning properties located at 280 and 282 West, 7200 South from Clean Industrial Zone to the Transit-Oriented Development Overlay Zone.
Mayor, I move that we table ordinance number 2022-016, rezoning properties located at 280 and 282 West, 7200 South from Clean Industrial Zone CI to the Transit-Oriented Development Overlay Zone, TODO, pending a mutually agreeable development agreement between the city and the developer.
We have a motion on the table.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, I've got a question. I mean, what all are we looking for in this development agreement? Is it just that it stays like that and it's senior housing, or is there something else that we're wanting? I mean, Councilman Brown was saying, 3 stories or 6 if it's mixed use. What, I mean, if we're gonna have a development agreement,
Leave the 6 out.
Well, but what's the direction?
Well, I think that's the
staff
allowed,
should have
or
to
it might
prepare
be
this
5.
development agreement?
My direction is similar to Councilmember Brown's. I agree that if we are to rezone to TODO, which has never been said that many times in a single meeting, but if we are to do that, then the project should very much mirror other TODO zones in our city and other projects that fit those elements. And I think our staff here is very capable of having those discussions and negotiations with the developer and coming back to us as a council with something that they know that we are likely to approve. And, you can always reach out to us and once you have an agreement and see if that's the way that we were thinking.
Like the Joe Morley's property is a good example to look at. That's on my mind because I saw that the building's gone today. I think there's always sort of resistance in that area, and then lately we've had people that normally said we don't want that, emailed the whole city council and said we should approve it, which I thought was interesting because, but I do think it was one of the better products and projects, as far as, open space and dog usage. Like, I think did that pass unanimous? I think so. The Joe Morley property. I mean, I think that's what we think of when we think of the TOD zone more than this.
The one thing I would definitely want to see is some sort of pedestrian safety improvement in whatever's going on this site. And obviously all the other elements of the zone change as well, but that one in particular would be important to me.
Can I just ask if Vendaline or Adam, if you're comfortable with the descriptions you've been given?
Let me just quote from the zone real quick. Height, the maximum height for a residential structure is 7 stories. Buildings of 6 and 7 stories are limited to structures directly adjacent to State Street and 7200 South. And the density, if I don't see it right now, but I think it's 80 or 82 units per acre. So it would be, as you had observed, quite different than what the potential plan and the materials is.
In that vein, and just for the clarification, I've heard the comments, pedestrian, some wanting it to be more in line with expectations for TOD, but is there a reuse scenario that keeps the same footprint? I mean, we've talked height and some of that kind of stuff, but recognizing the type of unit and use of unit, but is the reuse of the existing building in its current location and configuration just differently, is that something that is acceptable? Or if it comes back and it's just some version of that, is the council going to find that to be unacceptable?
Is there any residential allowed in clean industrial or only hotel? Which seems kind of weird to me that you could stay there short term, but not long-term, especially since you could have like an in-suite where you could stay there for
Well,
years.
I mean, it's like on a hotel, you can have a railroad go right next to you, and you just gonna be woke up every night. You could have somebody different there every night, and they
Yeah.
don't care.
That's true.
But if you have residential right next to somebody
Clean
that's
industrial. Yeah, that's fair.
making a lot of noise, that's not a good scenario.
And,
I mean,
like the
to
auto
me-
body and stuffs are far enough away from this then,
Yeah.
are they? 'Cause
I mean, there's, right behind it is a medical facility that, I don't know if they produce what they produce, but that, so, but it's very light industrial. A lot of, I mean, there is cabinet shops in there, there's a bunch of stuff that they actually manufacture things. Granite countertops, all that's back through there. So there's a whole bunch of light industrial,
yeah,
and it goes all the way to our border.
yeah.
I guess my concern is, I'm concerned that it doesn't go too high. I do not want to see a 7-story
Right.
building or even a 6. 5 is what we've got at MODA, and that's as high as I ever want to go.
That's what I thought TOD was versus TODO versus TOD.
So I would prefer 3 or 4-story building. That's what I would like, but, I mean, if they come up with something really good, hey, that's great.
I think it would be challenging just knowing that building and someone, you know, I went into that building just to take a look at it because I don't have anything better to do on some evenings, but I would think that it would be a difficult rehab. I'm not a developer. They could probably put something together. I would just think, you know, the use of that hotel alone. There are long-term residents of that hotel, as the chief is probably well aware in the back, but I would like to see, you know, if you rehab it and make it look, you know, completely unrecognizable to what it is today, then it would probably be something I'd be interested in. Otherwise, I know it's obviously much more expensive when you demo and build from new, but, you know, that would probably be something more along the lines of what we would like to see. Something new in the place of, you know, what's kind of been, you know, to be honest, a, you know, shady kind of location within the city.
So Matt, I appreciate you making that comment, because that's what I was thinking of, you know, really what do we want in this redevelopment agreement? If we're saying we don't want something in its current building, then we just gotta let them know and just deny it, and so that they can move on. Otherwise, if they're trying to guess what we have in our minds as they're doing this development agreement, it's just gonna be painful and expensive for them. So that's my thing, is if we don't want a 2-story building right there, we just have to say what we want is tear it down and put like a 5-story in, right? And make it senior housing or something. If we're okay with rehab what's there and make it senior housing, okay, but I don't know that that's the sentiment we've got here, that that's what we want in that spot. I mean, along 7200, I think we're all hoping that kind of redevelops along the whole part. So converting the current hotel to, you know, some permanent housing there, I don't know that gets us the redevelopment that we're looking for. I mean, it's not a formal redevelopment zone, but I know we want that changed. So that's where I'm coming from, is if we're gonna table it and tell them to do a development agreement, but if the developer's looking at, we just wanna kind of keep the same structure that's there, and that's it, and that's not what we want, I mean, let's just let them know that so we can move on. So that's where I'm at. And I don't know that I want the current structure that's there. I mean, I'd like to see something different.
I think that's a fair point, and I'm on that spot that there is no repurpose in my mind to justify a rezone to a TOD. It has to be, you know, a substantial product that we envisioned for, you know, areas by tracks. That's my personal view on the TODO.
Now, who knows, maybe the developers hearing, they'd be okay with us going 5 stories, maybe they're loving that, I don't know. But that's a lot more expense to
They have
do a 5-story.
pretty good poker faces there.
I think they'd be open to going bigger if that's what you want.
Councilmember Dettel, would you be willing to restate your motion? And maybe with some of the conversation happening here, it might be worth to have some clarification in there as well with your motion.
With the only question I have with that, I mean, I wouldn't want to make the motion so specific as to say, you know, pending a development agreement that requires the demolition of the current structure and rebuilding of a 5-story or less structure. I wouldn't want to get that specific. So I don't know how much more specific you want me to get other than to say pending mutually agreeable development agreement between the city and the developer.
Matt, do we feel comfortable with the direction we've given? Ish?
Well,
Ish is a good.
I think it would be really helpful is if we did go, thank you for asking, we probably need to go down, in my mind, and and say the adaptive use of this structure would work, there, you could see it has the potential to work, or you're looking for something that's new, not as part of the motion, but just your, I mean, that would be helpful. Straw poll kind of thing on that. I mean, Paul, what's your?
Well, my opinion is that, I mean, I would like to see a new face. I mean, we want to redevelop this corridor so that it looks like something new and not something just redone on the inside, basically. I personally would either like to see a high rise of 3 to 5 stories, 5 maximum, but not more than that. And I wouldn't be opposed to doing a townhome type structures there either. Like a townhome or apartments like it's over in your area. If they could put a lot of density in that type of units, and those are more of a, what are they, 2 stories over there or 3?
They're mostly, they're 2 with, they're 3 total, but 2 living. The bottom's usually like the garage.
The garage. So something like that, I would be fine with too.
But as far as the adaptive use of the structure, I'm hearing you say that's not really what
Yeah, it's probably just not. One concern with just redoing that in senior, I was thinking, and I talked to a few people about this, is for seniors to live there, I'm concerned if it's not upgraded and everything else, that there's a lot of, that's a crime corridor right through there. And I'd hate to have seniors live in a crime corridor. Now, if we could put in new safety measures and all this stuff that a high rise or townhomes or something, then I think we could get by with that a lot easier. But with just open parking lots and that kind of stuff, I think we're still gonna get a lot of crime in that area. That's my opinion. Dustin?
Yeah, I think I've made mine. I mean, I'm perfectly fine approving the rezone request, to be honest with you. But, you know, again, I think that my previous motion addresses what needs to be addressed, and we have very capable members of our planning team that will work with the developer and come back with something based on our commentary here tonight. And to me, I think that's fine.
You don't need to hear from me anymore, right?
I think I've.
I don't think the current building fits what the TODO is. I'd like to see, like Councilmember Glover said, a 3 to 5 story, maybe with commercial on that first floor. That's kind of what I had envisioned for the TODO zone. So I don't think the current building is, I'd like to see something new.
I want something new. I guess I'm going to be extreme. I don't even care if it's up to 7 stories. I mean, on 7200, that's like one of the main streets. It's by tracks. It's by the freeway. That's where there should be density. I'd like to see mixed use, commercial on the bottom, or even make it just not even residential. Make it an office building or something. I mean, I think that's in the area on our main roads where we can really develop. You know, I know you'd like I think if you put townhomes in there, you're underutilizing that space along that main road. So I think you go higher density. And I will await the hate mail I'll get for saying that.
I just think the developers should like grasp that never in the history that I've been on council, everyone's like, hey, this needs to be way more dense. You know, build something taller, bigger. This is, ever the developer that's ever come in is probably very jealous of the tone, which is unfortunate because it might not be, but, you know.
Okay. I think that straw poll was helpful. Councilmember Gettle, I'm gonna, again though, since we've gone through this conversation, if you restate your motion, we'll go from there.
Okay. Mayor, I move that we table, let me find my way here, 1 second. I move that we table ordinance number 2022-016, rezoning properties located at 280 and 282 West, 7200 South from Clean Industrial Zone, CI, to the Transit Oriented Development Overlay Zone, TODO, pending a mutually agreeable development agreement between the city and the developer.
Okay. Councilmember Brown, was that your second on that originally?
Second.
You second it. Great. All right. Any further discussion?
Do we want to keep talking to make Dustin do a fourth motion?
No,
We should.
I'll leave.
Rory, will you call roll?
In protest.
Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
And Gettle.
Yes.
Okay. That has been tabled. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda of the night, we've got two different items. Consider minutes of September 20th, 2022, and consider resolution number 2022 R44, a resolution authorizing, spelling error in there, the mayor to enter into an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County for UPDES media campaign cost sharing. As if you remember, 2 weeks ago, Keith came and presented about that, and we agreed to put it on consent. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I wasn't here, so.
I move
I'll
we
let
approve the
somebody else
consent
do it.
agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Rory, we call roll.
Yes, Councilmember Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Brown.
Yes.
Gettle.
Yes.
And Sperry.
Aye.
Okay.
And Mayor, I have one more comment to the prior issue on the development agreement. Let's make sure there's parking. We, you know,
Not MODA, yeah.
yeah, we don't want that anything is, there's adequate parking for it. So, and they're not charging extra for parking.
We've passed that ordinance, right?
Yes. Okay.
All right, well, that carries. Thanks for your comment, Sperry. And I just have to say, I think it's really funny and nice how much you all allow each other to make specific motions, such as Glover making the consent motion and everybody getting weird when he didn't. So thanks for that.
I don't know, man.
Hey,
When
somebody
he's
had-
not here, we don't know how to adjourn the meeting.
We just sit here.
Just stay.
They're long meetings.
Been here for 2 weeks.
All right, moving on to our, we've got two action items tonight. Moving on to our first one, consider resolution number 2022 R43, a resolution confirming Mayor Stevenson's appointment of Molly Signoretti as the chair of the Harvest Days Festival Committee.
I know that it's the mayor's appointment, but I have been on the Harvest Days Committee, so thought I would just talk about Molly for just 1 second before we move on with this. As cited in the memo, Molly has shown herself to be extremely capable, even with the fact that we started much later in the preparations for the Harvest Days Committee than we ever have before. Her leadership in that group, as well as having a strong Harvest Committee working with her, I think really pulled off a successful Harvest Days Committee. She's really shown herself to be highly effective at managing the Harvest Days Committee meetings, including having some of the other Harvest Day Committee members say things to the effect of, "I will not be on this committee if you are not the chair," which I think is the highest praise that a person can have. In addition to that, she is kind enough to laugh at my terrible jokes, which I appreciate. But most importantly, though, like I said, she's a creative, tenacious, and strong leader that is able to work with the community staff and her fellow Harvest Days Committee members. And for all those reasons, I recommended, the mayor agreed to the appointment of Molly to this position. And she is here if you have any questions for her.
I'll just add that we've all seen Molly's excellence in our Harvest Days earlier this year, and having a committee that is already working towards next year, and Molly at the helm of that, and being willing to lead that charge again, preparing for the whole year. Just incredibly thankful for her and all of your work.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments for Molly?
I just want to thank you for your time and help with everything so far, and your commitment to the neighborhood already. You were, at your block parties first year, in the neighborhood and whatnot. And I think you've been a great addition to Midvale.
Thanks. I should have recorded what Matt said. Like, that was so nice.
Actually, it is.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. So
You can watch it on YouTube.
I can. Oh, great. Perfect.
I just want to echo Councilmember Brown's sentiment. I really think you're a true value to the city of Midvale.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thanks. I'm excited. Should be fun. You guys have any questions? Sorry, my voice is like half gone, so.
I know there was a recent, you guys kind of did a unwinding kind of event, like what went right and what went wrong.
Yeah.
Are you going to present some of those findings to the council?
So we weren't going to present the details of them. If you want to like review details, you're welcome. I'm happy to share those notes.
Or just some major themes that you would like to work on for next one, or what you thought was successful versus years past?
Yeah, so I can talk about a few things. You have to excuse my voice when I talk. The major thing that we feel like just, kind of affected everything was the ability to plan for time. We started a little bit late, so things like food trucks and band options and things like that were relatively limited. And so that, I think, is probably our biggest thing going forward for the next year, is just having time. So we had our first meeting already 2 weeks ago, and we have our next one on Thursday to just nail down those things. So I'm really excited for that, just to have more options. Things that went really well was we started that Carnival Row, and that was like a huge hit for kids and families. So expanding things like that, and bringing in some new activities that the council or the committee is working towards. So.
Cool. Yeah, again, I agree with everyone. You did a great job, and looking forward to seeing what you come up with for next year, pending the vote.
Seems.
So I have an idea for next year after our drone presentation, do a little hide and seek with the kids.
Okay.
Have UPD, and
I think this is a good
that'd
game.
be awesome. I don't know if
love
they
it.
can hook that up to a TV or monitor so that people can see that. What's that?
They'll be on the drone.
Well, no, they'll just send one out at a time,
With the dogs too, to help. They get the full immersion.
I think that's fun.
We'll let you work on that part. I'm not going to be over that.
Or at least have the drones as, flying over the parade route or something.
That would actually be cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2022-R-43, a resolution confirming Mayor Stevenson's appointment of Molly Signoretti as the chair of the Harvest Days Festival Committee.
Second.
Probably should ask how to pronounce that before.
It's fine. In the U.S., it's pronounced Signoretti. If you go to Europe, it's Signoretti. There's no. You say it however you want.
Good to know. We do have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion of that? Okay, Rory, will you call roll?
Councilmember Robinson.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Gettle.
Yes.
Sperry.
Aye.
And Glover.
Aye.
Okay, that passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, I hope to see you all at the Halloween event. I'm going to put that in there.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You can't get rid of that easy, so I'm part of that too.
Okay.
Lovely.
All right, moving on to our second action item of the night. Consider resolution number 2022-R45, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a right-of-way access and use agreement with West Jordan City for the construction, maintenance, and repair for the 7800 South Jordan River pedestrian bridge. Keith.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before I begin, I just wanted to mention that our leaf bag program is underway. There's a table set up upstairs in front of the community development offices that residents can come by and pick up some leaf bags. It also has some other information and swag concerning stormwater and stormwater awareness. So anybody has questions, or if you have residents ask you, we do have those bags available. Tonight I bring before you an interlocal agreement between Midvale City and West Jordan. West Jordan has received some funds to place a new pedestrian bridge across the Jordan River, just to the north of the 7800 South Bridge. We have been involved with the design of this, at least on our side. We've given them direction on how and where we would like that connection to our trail be made. We have been dealing with them for quite a while on this. I guess they're finally ready to get moving on it. The bridge will be built according to UDOT standard specs and drawings. The bridge itself will be a prefabricated steel truss bridge, similar to ones we have that are existing across the trail. Jake, do you want to show a couple of those pictures? This one is the one that was put in by the Kiwanis Club a number of years ago, a little bit south of this location. And then, if you want to do the next one, Jake, this one is a bridge that West Jordan replaced about a year ago. If you remember that old kind of wooden structure that was having issues. Anyway, they replaced it with this bridge. During the process, they also cleared out a lot of the underbrush along the river for us, if you recall that episode. This agreement, as the mayor mentioned, will provide for access for the construction, maintenance, use of the bridge. They will maintain the bridge and their side of the trail. Our part of it is to maintain our trail and connection to the bridge itself. All of the funding will be done through West Jordan. We will be involved, of course, in the construction and have people there during the construction of the bridge. Today, we have not heard of a time frame of when this will take place, but once we do, we'll pass that along. West Jordan is anxious for us to expedite this agreement. Therefore, I'm requesting that you suspend the rules and take action on this item tonight.
One thought I have is, especially during Gardner Villages, like witches events and like that's coming up, a lot of people will park along 72 and walk there, and it's very dangerous right now where the bridge is at, right? They're almost walking in traffic. So I don't know if there's a way, I mean, I'm glad West Jordan's paying, it sounds like you're paying for most of this.
All of it.
All of it. I'm sure we'll have a benefit, but is there any, it would be nice where sort of that sidewalk ends or something, if we could provide signage, you know, that says like, hey, you can cross the river, you know, like river crossing right here. Because it's a little, it might be hidden to people, right?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, just for future.
I'm sure Glenn would love to make some signs.
Does that make sense? It's something we can direct people that way. Because that,
I was working on something else. Help me.
just, it's everything. We can talk about it later. I think it's a great idea.
Sorry.
Well, I'll communicate with him on that, yeah.
That should not be a problem.
Well, so, I mean, the current one that's there along 7800, is that being taken down?
No.
It's on the other side.
This is, yeah, the one to the south will stay there because it's brand new. It's just a year old, basically, that one right there. So this one is on the north side of 7800 South.
Is this just gonna, there's that weird, like, where you have to go underneath. Is this just gonna prevent people from having to do that, where you have to go, like, basically underwater to get out the other side?
It depends where they wanted to cross to our side, but yeah, they could use this as a detour.
Okay, that's
to
a
get
good
out from
idea.
under that. Yeah,
It's-
sometimes when the river's running high, that becomes an issue for them.
And it's just, it's dark and kind of, it's not a place you really want to go 10 o'clock at night.
So, I mean, the bridge that was put in by the Kiwanis Club is what you said. Isn't that one?
That's on the other side.
That one's further south. So there's, I guess I should have done an aerial photo for this. So the one put on by the Kiwanis Club is several hundred feet. Rotary Club, sorry. Oh, that's right. Sorry, Chris. Chris was involved in that. That is, I don't know, about maybe, half a mile or so down the trail from 7800 South. This bridge right here is the one that West Jordan replaced about a year ago. It's just a few hundred feet south of 7800 South. This new one they're proposing to do is to the north of 7800 South, creating a connection from our side to their side at their little trailhead. I think they have some restroom facilities in there and a little bit of a sitting area.
It's technically a bird watching area. I came to find out.
So I've prepared a resolution and a suggested motion for your consideration and would be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Well, I was looking at the picture you had, and I thought it was a bridge, but it's that pipe that's going across. So that's what I was.
People could try to cross that. That would be pretty acrobatic.
No, they should not.
Yeah. I'll edit the record.
All right, I'll ask for a motion on this.
Mayor, I move that we suspend the rules and approve resolution number 2022-R-45, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a right-of-way access and use agreement with West Jordan City for the construction, maintenance, and repair for the 7800 South Jordan River pedestrian bridge.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and 2 seconds. Any other discussion on that? Rory, will you call roll?
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Gettle.
Yes.
Sperry.
Aye.
Glover.
Aye.
And Robinson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. All right, moving on to our discussion item of the night, Jordan Bluff environmental discussion. We'll hear from Billy and Matt.
Yeah, just set it up really quick. No, come on up. Billy, go into this a little bit. We'll go into this a little bit, but ever since the EPA made their changes to the Jordan Bluffs area, they do a certain amount of testing every year. Those reports are reviewed or submitted to the city and reviewed by the EPA and by the state. Recently, in the last year, we had provided a copy of that to Councilmember Gettle. And at the last meeting, he requested that we come in and discuss those findings from those reports and some of the activities on that site. So I asked Billy to do that, and that is how we got to this discussion.
All right. Is this run the thing? All right. Good evening. So Matt gave us a little introduction. I'll just give us a brief little history of Jordan Bluffs.
Could you tell everyone who you are, what you do?
Sure. My name's Billy Smathers. I'm the project site coordinator. Basically, I do all the environmental oversight for the redevelopment of the Jordan Bluffs area. The Jordan Bluffs, also known as the former Sharon Steel Superfund site, which is now delisted, that we're redeveloping. It was a milling facility from 1906 to 1971. They processed ore and produced lead, copper, zinc, other metals. They made a bunch of tailings that they disposed of on the site. And those tailings unfortunately contain lead and arsenic, which is our main concern, which led to it being a Superfund site. That's contaminated some of the groundwater. It also was windblown. It's a very windy area if you've been out there to some of the surrounding areas. So the EPA designed a remedy. The goal was to contain that contaminated groundwater on site to prevent it from migrating. So there's a couple parts of that remedy, one of which is an engineered cap. You can see the kind of the site overlay here. I don't know if laser pointer won't work anyway, but runs from 7800 South down to the city limit. I don't know what that is down there, where it starts to smell real bad by that place or whatever. But they capped all the tailings. There's a geocomposite drain, which is designed to drain any surface water that falls on the site quickly. Then there's a PVC liner, which is impermeable, keeps water out of the tailings, and then a geosynthetic clay liner, which contains bentonite clay, which is a swelling clay, which also just is a secondary protection of water percolation onto the site. Then on this map there, I drew a rough red line here is what's called the interceptor trench, which is, depending on where on the site, but it's about 30 feet deep. It's basically a French drain that's buried to intercept any groundwater that's migrating from the east towards the Jordan River and re-divert it down to the southern end of the site. I think with the development of Holmes Homes, they piped it all the way to the wetlands there on the south that you can see there. We also have some institutional controls and some groundwater monitoring wells as part of that remedy.
Will you, if it's not later in your presentation, I'm sorry, will you explain what institutional controls are?
They're just part of Midvale City Code that has to do with this site specifically, that controls what happens on the site and how to protect everyone from the contamination. Do you have anything to add? Okay. So as part of this remedy, there's the UDEQ oversees a long-term monitoring program to make sure that the remedy is continuing to work as designed. I copied and pasted their goals, but basically they're trying to just make sure that this contamination, the groundwater, isn't traveling anywhere. There's 19 monitoring wells on the site, 16, well, they're screened in different aquifers. There's the US&G aquifer is the unconfined aquifer, which is basically your highest aquifer that your rainwater and stuff gets into. Then there's some deeper aquifers that are confined. So we have different wells in different ones. They're just trying to make sure that this contaminated groundwater in the highest aquifer isn't migrating to the lower ones as well. And then also they sample in the river at 2 points and then at that interceptor trench outfall that I was talking about. They've sampled 12 of those every year and then all 19 every 5 years during their 5-year review. We won't go through all of this, but this is just the table of all their sample results since 1999. And most everything is pretty stable, and below their action levels, the one outlier is their monitoring well 7A, which has historically from the beginning had arsenic levels above their action level.
Can you clarify what arsenic level above the action level means?
They've created action levels. I'm not sure how they landed on the numbers for the wells. You can see the action levels. It's on that. It's on the table, but it's 190 micrograms per liter for the site, for anything leaving the site. I think if they exceed that, then there would be need for some kind of treatment of the groundwater leaving the site. That would be, once we exceed that, then that's the action level that some other steps are necessary. So MW7A is exceeding that, but that's the only well, which I'll discuss on the next slide. But I have monitoring results here. Oh, we'll just go to the next one, then we'll jump back. How about? So 7A, it's above the established action level. They noticed that right from the get-go. They, EPA and UDEQ investigated that. There was a historic Bingham Creek channel, I guess, that ran down from the Kennecott copper mine. And so they think tailings in that creek were swept down that creek and contaminated that historic creek channel. And the monitoring well 7A was actually finished in that creek bed. So they drilled into that creek bed, and that's why they think they see those high levels just in that well. and they determined that they didn't need to do a pump and treat system since it was part of that creek channel and not a function of the remedy being not working. Does that make sense?
I think I would like to just clarify one thing too, is that he said the high levels, what we're looking at there is around 200 micrograms per liter over 100, and the action level is 190.
Yeah.
And so what we're saying is that it is just barely over the minimum threshold. It's not a high level, it's just over that minimum threshold. And then well, I think you explained the creek bed, but if they had any other questions on that, maybe we could follow up on that.
Okay. But other than that, well, the EDQ summarizes that the remedy is working according to plan. We're not contaminating lower aquifers, and we're not impacting the Jordan River from the groundwater discharging from the site. So the remedy remains protective and effective protective of human health and the environment. So now we're redeveloping the site. So this remedy's in place. As part of redevelopment, Midvale hired a consultant, which wrote us a site management plan, which created protocols for redevelopment within the bounds of the record of decision, which is what laid out the initial remedy. So the site management plan lays out a framework for how to redevelop the site, staying within the bounds of the record of decision. And then with each construction project that shows up, the developer submits a design site plan, which is basically a project-specific implementation of the requirements laid out in the SMP, the site management plan. So they just tailor specifically to what they're doing. That design site plan gets approved through the DUDQ and EPA that says, this is your plan, you're going to follow these protocols, and that will maintain the integrity of the remedy while we redevelop. And then my position is funded by the EPA through a grant to provide oversight through that whole process while we redevelop. So the components of that design site plan and site management plan, they covers work health and safety, stormwater management, protection of the cap, soil management protocols, dust control, protocols for how to cut into and reconfigure the cap components, the PVC liner, and those things, and then oversight and reporting requirements. So far, we've put in Bingham Junction, Ivy Drive, Wasatch is put in 2 phases. I think they're called Parkview and Reserve at View 78. We're just finishing up Zion's campus, and then Homes Phase 1 is down by the wetlands. So that's a broad overview of the sampling, monitoring program, and the redevelopment. Do we have any questions?
Just one more clarifier. What is the minimum depth that there would be from the on the cap, from the surface of the soil through all the liners and clay and all that to the tailings? What's the minimum depth that we would see?
So in any non-hardscape surfaces, it's 2 feet of clean fill, and then your engineered cap, and then you'll have the contaminated tailings.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
One, if there was any sort of failure in the lining that posed a threat to the groundwater, how long would that take for you guys to discover? I've noticed that it's like every 5 years. That's what it said in this presentation. Like like these numbers are they annual or are they every 5 years?
So they sample 12 wells annually, and then the extra 5, all 19, every 5 years. So it is an annual event, and then the full set is every 5 years.
Okay.
So do they rotate through those wells? The 12 or just the 12 and then?
No, it's just the 12 and then the other 5 get added every 5 years. They don't rotate them.
Is it a lot of work? I'm trying to understand 12 to 19 or whatever, because that seems like, or 12 to 17. Because it seems like you almost do them all anyways, right? Like, why can't they just do the full set? Is it substantial work?
It's like a couple day sampling of it. I don't know the reasoning behind the 12 and the 19 for the annual versus the 5 year.
You know, because it'd be different. It's like, we only do 5, and then we do the other, 7, So just an odd number to me that we just don't do them all every year. But, is that something we could look into to alleviate that, or?
I mean, there might be some reasoning behind it. I could ask Tony House. He's the EDQ project manager. There might be a very simple answer to that. I just don't know.
But I think the other thing is that the wells that they do take from are already an array out there. So I suppose it's possible that, and you can speak more to this, but that something could get through. But it would be hard for something to get by the 12 that the 19 wouldn't pick up. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to lay out a map and look at them, but I would imagine it's some kind of scenario like that.
There are some people who live in this area, myself included, and I'm not trying to be the Aaron Brockovich of the group, but I know there are times when things fail or when things become, like when you develop an area and something were to happen, that kind of gets hidden from public view, fixed as quickly as possible, and then, no one's the wiser. I don't know that I have those beliefs, but there are people who say, like, ever since construction's been done generally in this area, people have felt that they've gotten sick or they've known people who have gotten sick, and they blame it on specifically water, wind, blowing around some of the heavy metals. So is that something you can confidently say is not happening?
Yeah, I mean, I'm out there every day. Like,
Well, I mean, we are too.
Dust for sure is
we
an
live
issue
there.
on the site.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm not going to say it's clean dust. I mean, it is the clean fill that is blowing around. The tailings, when they're moved around, are put in very specific areas and treated very specific protocols to make sure they are not blowing around.
And the clean fill was like dirt brought from somewhere else and put in, right?
Yes.
Not like treated.
Yeah, it's just tested for lead and arsenic to be below certain levels, and that was brought in as the clean 2 feet of fill on the top of the site.
Why did it seem like there's 50 feet of dirt or something?
The tailings are about
waves,
50 feet
so
thick.
it goes, the cap's not flat, goes way down and then comes back up, right?
Yeah, and there is 50 feet of tailings. in
That's
general.
That's very different than 50 feet of cleaned.
No, generally the topography you see on top of Jordan Bluffs, it's only 2 feet of clean fill that follows those ridges and valleys. And then the cap material, and then up to 50, 60 feet of tailings.
So for the Zions Bank, did they have to puncture the thing? So the whole helico pier nonsense didn't actually matter?
Well, no.
So their building sitting on these piers, they cut the liner all the way around their building, and it's actually now attached to their building. So their actual building is acting as the engineered cap in their footprint.
I'm 100% sure the presentation was like, the piers will go down to the cap. They have this special kind of pier that sits on top of the cap that they test for puncture. That was like 50 feet. It was not, hey, we got to cut a hole in the cap, go down 50 feet into tailings. Am I remembering this?
No, you're not.
Wrong?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they said.
I always knew that they cut the cap and then they resealed it back to the building.
Because they have to go through it to get to
They gotta have enough,
good.
they've gotta go down
Stable,
through all of the tailings down into
But that would
bedrock.
be the case anywhere that the ground isn't perfectly situated, right? They sold it. They sold the need that the cap was the issue when really it was the tailings being unstable that they have to get through to bedrock.
But you've also, the cap was the important part about keeping water from going down and then leaching out. That's the important part of the whole thing.
So,
well, I get that.
There are a couple things there. That is what I recall, is that their presentation was that they had to get through all of the tailings in order to get to more stable soil, which is why they needed to use the particular type of piers. A significant portion of Billy's job, as well as the site management plan and those other things, are specifically about the engineering around the liner and how that can be cut and those kinds of things, and repaired, because it always has to be maintained as a constant liner. One of the things that Billy was involved with as an example of this is that when they have to do deep trenching, we had a very specific engineered plan from the EPA on how that would occur. When the developer was going in and doing the deep trenching to put in some of the utilities, we found, not me, that there were little small sort of pinholes that were coming in the liner because the deep trench was pulling on that liner, and that's what all of these reviews and Billy's job is in looking at those things. And so there was a pretty expensive fix that had to go in order to sort of re-engineer how that liner went in. So, I mean, we're not just saying, is there a big cut in there? We're saying, and I think actually we even had an example one time of where we found a piece of liner that was in some dirt that had been moved, and they had to pull up a large a section of it was pavement or sidewalk in order to figure out where that hole was made, so we could make sure that it was patched. And so that's what we're constantly doing, is making sure that that liner is protected and we keep at least that 2 feet above it. And so as far as some of the concerns about this, and Billy can speak, I mean, he's already talking about the clean fill that's on top of there, but is that it's liner, clay, fill that are keeping the tailings from blowing around. And then the other part of it that's important is that and again, Billy, if I mess up the engineering here, correct me, but that the water is moving towards the river as well, so that it should be intercepted by the trench, but any of the water that comes on the site is either going to be moved from the features, the waves that create the funneling that move the water off the site. Is that not?
Yeah, the site is designed to drain any surface water that.
And it all moves
hits that
towards the river.
Off the site, yes.
I didn't mean to derail. I swear I've never heard 2 feet before, ever. So that threw me off. So it's not really thank you for your presentation, but we've heard a million presentations. I don't think I've ever heard 2 feet only. Am I misremembering here? But it seems a lot less than what we've been told.
I know that someone said that some of it was deeper because that's where they were gonna put the sewer drains and stuff.
Right.
There are deeper sections, and depending on what plants they plant, they put in more fill for root allowances so that the roots don't affect the cap as well.
That was my big concern.
My concern about the whole thing is it's one thing whenever the EPA helps to clean up a Superfund site, you put in a cap, you put in clean fill, but then it's like when you start to put thousands of people on top of it, it's a little bit different of an issue. If no one lives there and there's some sort of problem that contaminates the groundwater, it's a big deal, but at least, there's not thousands of people who've been exposed to a deadly heavy metal. So I think the more that we dig into the ground, the more likely it is that something catastrophic could happen. And that's why I thought, just having this discussion is worthwhile, because, look, Councilmember Brown already learned something today, and so did I, because that's what I thought as well.
Okay.
But, like when Ivy was cut into deeply, that would have been something, was that the tailings exposed during that? That was at least 10 feet or more.
Yeah, obviously, while we're doing construction, the liner's going to be cut open, the tailings are going to be open.
So they're removing the tailings when they dig that hole?
Yeah, so depending on where utilities go, we have to do a trench, and some of those have to be gravity fed, or the water lines have to be at certain burial depth. So that required cutting the liner open, peeling it back, digging your trench through the contaminated material. We moved that to a repository that we built with berming and wind fence, and we compact it so it's not wind blowing. So that gets contained over in an area. Then they come back in, reline the trench with those engineered cap materials. So then the liner is restored, then they put their water line back in through the trench.
Is this compacted new tailings? You
They
know,
get rid of the
where is that? Is that in Midvale?
So now the tailings are all getting buried in our soccer field right now. So they've piled them up and we're relining them, and it's gonna be part of Midvale City Park, which is pretty much all the tailings that have been generated from the road. Well, so they're in a couple places now.
But we're covering them.
They're getting recovered by an engineered cap to keep water out of them.
Thank you. I'm learning a ton. I'm learning a lot today.
Bryant would like some fill for his backyard.
Yeah. I hear my tomatoes will grow bigger.
Most all Ivy Drive and then the residential that's already on the site is not on the cap, is that right?
The
new one would.
Yeah, so the only residential right now is the 2 Wasatch phases. There's actually, you can see just 2 townhouses right there on the corner of Seguini and Bingham there. They're the only ones that are actually on the cap. Those other ones are off cap, but they're still technically part of the Superfund site.
But the
Zion's is on the cap.
But for lack of a better term, the prison that the mayor pointed out the last week would be on the cap, right? Isn't that right here?
Prison reference, sorry.
Yeah, you weren't involved in that. It'd be
At
right
the
there, right?
corner of Bingham and Ivy would be.
Yes.
To be clear, we're not getting a prison.
Right.
This was just my comment on a development that was proposed.
Yes, so the 2 phases of Wasatch and then the 3 phases of Holmes Homes are off the cap. Anything else that goes in there will be on cap.
So just in your opinion, again, those who live there now are not facing any sort of health crisis, and if something were to arise that would cause such a thing, you would know about it and be able to alert the community in relatively quickly fashion.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Billy or Matt? Thank you, Billy.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to
Second.
adjourn. We have a second. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor, please say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, we're